Uh, oh, it's not seeing it. Hold on 1 second, guys. There we go. Share. All right, so we should be good to go on here. So welcome everybody to our first in a series of seminars that we're gonna have with you guys during our COVID pause. Tonight we have Mike Barr and Eric Wagner. Mike's gonna be asking Eric a lot of questions about Swarthmore College and what it's like to be a student athlete in college, and then a little bit about his specific school in Swarthmore. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Mike take over now, and we're going to head on over to the next slide.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bree. First of all, I've known Eric for almost 20 years, and he's one of the hardest working coaches I know, and he really truly cares about his program. Eric, it's not up on the PowerPoint, but could you tell us what you did before you actually took the Swarthmore position, where you came from and where you played when you were younger?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And thanks so much for inviting me on, Mike, and Bree for setting this up. Really, really happy to be here. Yeah, I started out playing Division III soccer at Connecticut College up in New London, Connecticut. And then from there, just my friends used to give me a hard time and say that I couldn't keep a job because over the next 5 years or so, I was bouncing around from position to position. Really an opportunity to work with a lot of extremely experienced coaches. I worked with John Rennie at Duke University. I worked with Mike Noonan, who's now the head coach at Clemson University, when he was coaching Division III soccer back in the day. And I worked with Mike Berticelli out at the University of Notre Dame before I settled in at a small school down in Texas and started their men's soccer program, a school called Southwestern University. And then finally got the chance to move back east down at St. Mary's College in Southern Maryland, also a Division III school, and then moved up here after 5 years at St. Mary's. So I coached for 9 years as a head coach before moving to Swarthmore. But Swarthmore, I've been, this is my 19th year at Swarthmore now.
That's an amazing career, and the contacts you've made over the years are really impressive. I just want to get this out of the way. Could you share with us how Swarthmore's handled the COVID-19 virus and the effect it's had on your team this year and possible recruiting?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Mike, because you know, we went through all the phases of trying to figure out what was going to happen from, yeah, maybe we'll be able to have a season to doesn't look good. So what are we going to do instead to finally, you know, arriving on campus. Swarthmore College has invited only half of the student body back each semester. So in the fall, only the freshmen and sophomores were invited to campus. And in the spring, only the juniors and seniors have been invited to campus. So a normal student body of about 1,700 students is reduced to somewhere between, you know, 750 and 900 students, depending on the semester. We had 12 students on campus this past fall. Our conference and Division III as a whole, we're not doing any competition. And so what we did is within the various protocol stages, the phases of return to play that the NCAA and the college allowed us, we went from, you know, only working out in the weight room with massive spaces between us and only in groups of 6 to going out on the field in groups of 6. So we'd actually have a 2-hour time block and we'd do 6 guys at one time block and 6 guys at another time block, to finally being able, you know, after about a month of being back on campus and the students being tested every week, faculty and staff being tested every week, we were finally able to get out on the field and train. And so we had 3 days a week training sessions, and that was pretty much it.
Is there anything planned for the spring?
So status quo for the spring within the conference, nobody's competing. Unfortunately, you know, I'm only going to have 3 players back this spring. What a lot of the Swarthmore players have decided to do is take time off from school either get a job or an internship or whatever it might be. And a variety of really cool things that some of them are doing. But ultimately, a lot of them have decided to move back to the Philadelphia area. Swarthmore students come from all over the world and all over the country. And a lot of them have decided to move into the Philly area, whether it's Swarthmore or South Philly or University City, places like that. And they've signed on with Westchester United's men's league team with Blaze Santangelo. And they are doing, they're doing training out there 3 days a week with matches on the weekend. So at least they're staying active.
So you'll probably see a lot of your players stay for 5 years then, I would suspect.
If not 5 full years, at least an extra semester. Yeah, we had 8 seniors this year. 8 seniors were supposed to come back this year. And of those 8, 7 of them decided to take at least a semester off. Only one of them is going to graduate this spring.
That's good because you'll see them next fall then.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, when we went to the Sweet 16 in 2019, those guys did not want to stop the ride. They wanted to come back and really, take it even further next time. So
yeah, it was tough for them to handle.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt just real fast. Guys, if you have questions as they're going through, if you can write them down and just remember them for the end, we'll do a Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Next slide, Ray. Okay, now I'm very aware of Swarthmore College, but for people who haven't visited the campus, could you just describe what it's like, especially when you first arrived and saw it?
Yeah, first time I arrived was 1985 when I came to see my older sister graduate from Swarthmore. It was as impressive and sort of incredible then as it is now. And it is an arboretum, so the entire campus is managed by an arboretum staff. And we have about 250 acres of woods right beside campus. But the actual, the buildings and the structures and the college part of the campus, an extra 125 or so acres, as you can see in the photograph here, are wooded, and it's on a hill, so it overlooks the greater area. It's at a high point in this general vicinity, but the campus sort of flows gently down to the Crum Creek, which runs through the woods. There are, of the 1,700 students who are normally here, about 95% of them live on campus. So there are dorms sprinkled out all over campus. We have athletic facilities on the east side and the south side of campus. And then sort of the crown jewel of campus is the outdoor amphitheater, where the students graduate every spring and where the students come together as a class for the first time every fall. It's a pretty magnificent place. And if you want to get outside and walk around after studying for hours and hours, it's no better place to do it. It's also interesting, Mike, that we have the SEPTA train runs right through the middle of campus. Yes. You could hop on the SEPTA train and be down in Center City in 15 minutes, which is pretty sweet.
Honestly, the train runs right through the campus, so it's pretty unique. Next slide. Okay. I'm aware of the strength in academics with Swarthmore College as being recognized one of the top colleges in the United States. With the academics, is it difficult to recruit? Because if I remember correctly, students at Swarthmore normally have SAT scores of over 1,500, and 87% of your students are ranked in the top 10% of your class. Does that make it difficult for you to recruit?
There's two ways to look at it, and one way is, it definitely narrows the pool of applicants, potential applicants that we can recruit, which is, that makes it difficult on the one end. But on the other hand, because Swarthmore is so highly rated and so prestigious, that pool of applicants, the potential soccer players who are out there, who are at the highest end academically, who might be interested, are interested because Swarthmore is such a great place to go. And so we compete typically for prospective students against the Ivy League schools, Penn and Princeton and Harvard and Yale. We also compete against, the top small liberal arts colleges in the country, like Amherst and Williams and Middlebury, Pomona College out in California. And then the other schools that we see a lot of overlap with in terms of the students we're recruiting are schools like MIT, Carnegie Mellon, um, schools like that that are really at the highest end of the academic spectrum, and are producing the best and brightest every year.
Yeah, I've known the reputation for a long time. So besides SATs and GPA, what other methods of determining whether a student is a Swarthmore College student, what other ways can you have the opportunity to show that they're ready for Swarthmore?
I think now that it was sort of, the impetus was COVID, of course, but this had been in the works for years. Swarthmore is one of many colleges nationwide, but Swarthmore has decided for this year and next year to go test optional. So students don't even have to take the SATs or the ACTs if they don't want. It, there are lots of questions and lots of problems with the SATs and the ACTs that make them limiting in some ways. But what Swarthmore does, because we look at the students holistically, we want to look at everything they do, not just their test scores and not just their grades and their GPA, but we also want to look at the rigor of the classes that they're taking. So getting a B in the top class in a subject at your high school is going to look more Swarthmore is going to look more favorably on that than if you got an A in a much easier class, because they want you to be challenging yourself. They're really looking at academic ambition, students who really take their academics seriously, who really are intellectually curious and driven and motivated. And so they're also going to look at writing samples. They're going to look at extracurricular activities that they're going to be involved in, leadership positions that they've held, just a variety of things that go into what makes you a student as a whole.
Are all the students who apply or prospective students, are they interviewed? Is that part of the policy in determining whether a kid goes to Swarthmore?
So it is certainly something they're allowed to do, and we have a full-fledged interview process. But students do not have to. It is an optional part of the process. Now, what I will say is that if a student gets an interview, they are more likely to have a more robust dossier when it comes in front of the admissions pool. Now, obviously, if you're not very personable or if you have trouble interviewing, it might not be the best idea to do it. But most students who are, curious and academically engaged and excited about going to college, when they interview with an alum or they interview with an admissions officer, they're gonna show more of who they are, and that's only going to enhance their profile.
Does letters of recommendation play a small role in accepting students?
So part of the process is definitely letters of recommendation from teachers. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to stick 7 or 8 different recommendations in there. Usually the Common App asks for 2. And, if you have somebody outside your school or somebody who was a mentor in say Boy Scouts or in some club that you were involved in outside of school, you could certainly include that if it gives a broader picture of who you are as a person.
Yeah, you mentioned participation in extracurricular activities. If you're looking at sports in general, about how many students are participating in sports at Swarthmore?
So in general, in organized sports, whether that's varsity sports or organized club sports, we have 40% of the student body. If you're looking at varsity, it's about 20 to 25% of the students. We have over 300 varsity athletes in a pool of about in a school of about 1,700 students. So,
Wow. Do many of those students play more than one sport?
Not as much as they used to, Mike. When you and I were going to college, it was much more common for a soccer player to maybe play basketball or baseball in the off season, or for, lacrosse players to cross over with football players. And that was more common. But nowadays, because of sports specialization and also because of the demands of sports in college for off-season training and things like that. Fewer students are playing multiple sports. What I will say is that the athletes that I've had at Swarthmore who've been multi-sport athletes have been phenomenal students, phenomenal athletes, and usually have been major leaders in our teams. And then I'll also say that our track and field program tends to have the most multi-sport athletes because they run cross country in the fall, they do indoor track, they do outdoor track. So they're in season year round.
So in addition to your success, the basketball program over the last couple of years has achieved a lot of success too within Division III.
Yeah, there are over 400 Division III men's soccer and men's basketball programs. And our men's basketball program, as of right now, is still ranked number one in the nation, because when COVID hit last March, we were preparing to host the Sweet 16 as the number one seed in the overall NCAA tournament. We'd lost one game all season. We went through the entire regular season undefeated, the only team in the country in any division that did that. And then we lost in the conference championship, but progressed to the Sweet 16. And that was on the heels of 2 seasons ago going to the national championship game and losing.
Wow, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is
But
amazing.
I guess it's kind of interesting that your success academically transfers to success in extracurricular activities. So it's pretty impressive with a college with this reputation, still having sports as main ingredient as far as attending a place like Swarthmore. How about the next one, Bree? So with your career, are there any special moments that you look back on and say how special it was? It doesn't have to necessarily be a victory or going to the championships in the NCAAs. Anything else?
There have been some absolutely amazing experiences and moments, no question about it. And I would say, probably certainly the biggest moment for me personally was back in 2008 when we won the conference championship and went to the NCAAs for the first time in my career. It was the first time I'd ever been as a player, as a coach, to the NCAA tournament. And it was absolutely, it was the most incredible experience I'd ever had. What was fascinating about it was that not only did we, make it to the NCAAs, but then we advanced so deep into the tournament to the Sweet 16 that year. But what it did, Mike, is it made me even hungrier for the next year.
Sure.
Because I enjoyed that experience so much. I said, this is what I want every single year. So the following year we went back, and the year after that, and so on and so forth. But there's another moment that I think was equally stands out to me. And that was the fall of 2019, when our team actually didn't even make it to the conference tournament. So we finished 6th in the Centennial Conference, but we had been undefeated outside the conference, had knocked off a couple of nationally and regionally ranked teams, and had done extremely well overall. What ended up happening was we got an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. And the moment that we sat in the classroom, you've been in that classroom, Mike, in the field house,
Right.
watching on the big screen where we normally do our team tactical talks and break down film, we were watching the NCAA selection show. And when our name went up on the board, the team absolutely erupted. It was a viral moment for our team that went out on Instagram and Twitter and everything. It was unbelievable. I still get chills just thinking about it because it was such an incredible moment.
I know it does sound incredible, especially now that you can see that when you find out on the screen that you've been selected, it must be special because it happens at the time it's actually happening. So tell us a little bit about the Centennial Conference, what are the teams you play against each year?
Sure. Centennial Conference is made up of 11 schools, all in Pennsylvania and Maryland. There are 10 schools on the men's side and 11 because we add Bryn Mawr on the women's side. Those schools are Swarthmore, Bryn Mawr, Haverford, Ursinus College up in Collegeville, Muhlenberg up in Allentown, Gettysburg, Dickinson, McDaniel College down in Western Maryland, Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland, and I'm missing one. Franklin and Marshall out in Lancaster.
Yeah, could you tell the parents and some of the players about how special the Swarthmore Haverford rivalry is?
Yeah, it's you know, people always talk about Yale and Harvard. People talk about Ohio State and Michigan. People talk about Duke and North Carolina in basketball. Well, the passion and the history and the intensity of the rivalry between Swarthmore and Haverford is equal to those. It just doesn't include all the lights and television and money and the numbers in the stands. But I'll tell you what, our biggest crowd every year is going to be the Haverford game. They could be the worst team in the country and we could be the second worst team in the country, and we're still going to get, you know, 1,000 people out to the game.
Yep.
And it's
I've attended those games, and they were special to me, and I didn't really care who won, just to see how the alumni were reacting to things going on in the field. It was great.
Yeah, it's a special relationship between the schools. Swarthmore and Haverford are part of the Tri-College Consortium, which also includes Bryn Mawr. You know, we're all within 15 minutes of each other. You know, Bryn Mawr and Haverford right up on the main line, and Swarthmore here. And all three schools have a shuttle that runs between the schools, and students can take classes in any one of the three, and it'll count for their degree. So there's that relationship, which is just really close, tight-knit relationship. But when it comes to sports, man, gloves are off and all bets are off.
That's the way it should be. And I know your team gets a chance to play internationally every other couple of years.
Every 3 years, yeah.
Okay, every 3 years. Tell us where you've been since you took over as coach.
Sure. In 2005, we went to England. We spent almost 2 weeks in England playing games in London and up in Manchester area. In 2008, we went to South America, a week in Argentina and a week in Brazil. In 2011, we went to Greece, played on the island of Crete and in Athens. In 2014, we went to the Czech Republic. And in 2017, we went to Barcelona. We were supposed to have been in South Africa last summer. That was our next trip in 2020. But of course, unfortunately, COVID has postponed that.
Yeah, and I know those trips are special because I've heard some of your players talk about it, how much fun they had. And it might be a little advantage for you heading into the season after playing such strong competition overseas.
Yeah, it certainly gives us an extended preseason where we normally come in and have a little over a week for preseason. You know, now we have closer to a month because we usually leave in early August. And we're overseas for a couple of weeks. And then when we get back, there's a few days beforehand, and then we start into preseason. So we get at least an extra 2 weeks of training and matches before the season starts. So
that sounds good. Let's get to the next slide, Bree. Okay, I'm sure this is what a lot of parents and players would like to know. First of all, what do you recommend to players and parents on when to contact you if they have an interest in playing at Swarthmore?
that's a great question. And I think it's a really important one because, you know, you won't believe this, Mike, but, you know, our deadline for admissions applications at Swarthmore was January 4th. And every single day, I continue to get emails from high school seniors asking me, you know, if I can watch their video and if they'd be interested, or if I'd be interested in having them come to Swarthmore. It's too late for seniors right now.
Right.
And so I think the point that I'm making is getting started early as a sophomore or a junior at the latest, in terms of just reaching out to colleges that you might be interested in, just to get on their mailing list, to get on their radar. I keep a database of almost 1,000 student athletes that I'm tracking over the various years. And that database is students who've contacted me and students I've seen out at tournaments and showcases and things like that. And, you know, if you send me an email or you get on our website and fill out our profile, you're in that database, and I'm going to be able to start putting you on my list when I go to tournaments. I'm going to be able to start contacting coaches and saying, I need to know more about these people.
You mentioned going to tournaments. Now, knowing that your roster sometimes is worldwide, and it's not based on, we got 30 kids from East Coast or something like that. What if you can't see a kid is there anything you can do as far as evaluating him from not actually seeing him live?
It's very difficult, especially given that video is so limited. I mean, it's really only two-dimensional, and what that doesn't show is the context, the level of play that they're at. It doesn't show speed in real time and things like that. And so it's very hard for me to gauge how a student on video is going to fit in and compete with the players that I have in the team right now. So if at all possible, getting to ID camps or getting to clinics or getting to tournaments where the coaches of the schools you're interested in is absolutely critical, because it's so hard for the highest level teams like Swarthmore to be able to recruit a student who they haven't seen play. Now, that said, I have had players in my team before who I haven't seen play before they come to Swarthmore. For instance, in this picture here, if you look at the boy right in the middle, number 10, he's a number 10 for us. He's an attacking midfielder, and he's played quite a bit since he's arrived. I never saw him live. I saw a little bit of video, and I got a really good phone call from a friend of mine who I've known since my days at Duke University, who referred him to me and told me that this kid was legit. And ultimately, that's how I found out about him. So if you can't be seen in person, if you can't get to a clinic or something like that, or you can't be seen at a game, making sure that you get as much information to the coaches as possible is the way to go.
So do letters of recommendation from reputable coaches or people you may know, is that a benefit to you?
Right. So Mike, if it came from you, obviously I would throw it in the garbage. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, knowing you and knowing, the quality that you understand and the level that you coach at, and that you've watched and you recognize the difference in levels. I would obviously look at that and take it very seriously. If it's someone I've never heard of, or someone who hasn't played or coached at a very high level and doesn't really understand the college level, it might be a little harder for me. But it is good information, because at least it's somebody I can talk to about the character of the person. It's somebody I can talk to about, the level of play that they're at.
And if you do get a letter of recommendation, but that player's not accepted at Swarthmore, do you ever let somebody else know that there's this kid really good, he didn't get into Swarthmore, would you have an interest in them? Does that ever happen?
Absolutely. Yeah, that happens all the time. In fact, my former assistant coach, Brendan Grady, is now the head coach at Juniata College out in North Central Pennsylvania. And, one of his top incoming recruits this year is a boy that he and I recruited together who couldn't get into Swarthmore. And we both knew that he wasn't going to be admitted. So we let him know and his parents know. And we said, listen, this might be a better option for you. But that's just one story of many where students, once I get into a conversation and get to know a student athlete, even if they can't get admitted to Swarthmore, I'm going to do everything I can to help them land at a place where ultimately they will be successful and they will be able to have a good experience in college soccer.
The second bullet point, character. Have you had any situations over the years you've been coaching where there was character problems or something you didn't recognize? Or are you looking for somebody who has such outstanding character, he's going to be the kind of kid you want to work with?
Yeah, I mean, that's become more and more the most important part of the recruiting process for us. We had a period of time several years back, 4 or 5 years, where our program was in the dumps because we emphasized talent over character. And what happened was, because the character was questionable of several of the student athletes, it ended up inhibiting the talent. And it made it so that the work rate and the commitment of the players was very questionable. And as a result, our team did very poorly. The fabric and the culture of the team really started to fall apart. And so we have really emphasized character more and more and more. I've had players who have not been fantastic athletes and not been fantastic players who've come in here and been unbelievable leaders, or been unbelievable team members who have helped this team do incredible things, despite not being the most amazing players. And character, when you're trying to mesh together a team who are going to be together every day, 6 days a week for all the months that we work together, travel overseas, travel on the road, go to the NCAAs, do community service together, and so on and so forth. You want to know that you can trust these people. I want to know that these are people who I'm comfortable referring to our alums, and I would be comfortable having them, hang out with my family and babysit my children and my grandchildren,
Yeah, it's a great message. The last bullet, I don't know, I'm sure you probably don't look at players positionally, but you're looking for players who can play a variety of positions, I would think, to step in if they want to need an outside back or you need a central midfielder. They're comfortable anywhere. Is that how you look at players?
I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot, Mike, and it's really a soccer player is a soccer player. And, he may play attacking center mid all through high school and club ball and gets to Swarthmore, and we're going to make him a left back. Who knows how it's going to work out? And who knows what each different coach is going to think of your particular talents, right?
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you have talent is the most important piece there. There are occasionally times where we will recruit positionally, for instance, if we're desperate for a striker or we're desperate for another center back or something like that, we might start looking a little more seriously positionally. But for the most part, we're going to recruit players. There is one exception to that, of course, goalkeepers. And that's the one time.
Do you carry 2 goalkeepers?
I carry the one year that we had to carry 2 because Zach Weimer broke his wrist in the 5th game of the season. Right. Was a really, really scary year for us. We carry a 3 at a minimum, and often we try to carry 4 if possible.
A real quick question, with the academic load that most of these students carry, are there times they have to miss practice because they have to attend a lab or something like that?
That's a great question. College soccer is just that. It's college and it's soccer, right? So they have to, and especially at Swarthmore, the school and the athletic department have a policy where you can't miss class for practice. You can't miss a lab or an exam for practice. Now, if we have a match and you have a class at the same time, or we have to leave to go on the road the day before the match, which happens every now and then there is a really good policy for us to work it out with the professors so the student can get the notes ahead of time or can meet with the professor. But we really emphasize not skipping classes. Now, the nice thing is we have lights so we can train at night and we play most of our matches at night. So we really don't have a lot of conflicts, Mike, but when there are conflicts, because the faculty work so well together, we usually work it out. Worst case scenario, we had a game at Ursinus one year, which had to be played at 4 p.m. Nathan Shoup had to do a lab that could not be replicated. We had to put our second string goalkeeper in that day.
Seriously, I think that's great to hear, to be honest with you, especially with all your success. We see the next slide, Bree. Okay, we talked about what it looks like. The resources I know you have for athletes to be successful are really clear. I think nobody goes unwatched as far as not meeting the success that they're expected to make. So I think you told us that this is at Swarthmore College, kids come in to succeed academically, and there'll be a lot of resources backing them up and to have success. But have you run into situations though where students really struggle and you had to pull out all the help you could to get them through a season or get them graduated?
Yeah, I mean, in the 3 different jobs that I've had, each school was different in terms of the level of students and the needs that they had. And in one school, I actually ran a study hall for my team once a week to make sure that everybody had their time, and we would check their grades and keep really close tabs on them. But that's not necessary at Swarthmore for the most part. 99 times out of 100, the students are well on top of their work. They're extremely good at managing their time. They wouldn't be at Swarthmore otherwise. But yes, absolutely. We do have students who get in over their head. We do have students from time to time who will, for whatever reason, just kind of fall off the rails a little bit. Typically what will happen is I will start to realize it because they're looking particularly disorganized or disheveled, or they're looking like they haven't slept in a while, something along those lines. Occasionally, a professor will get in touch with me. And then we have a variety, many layers of resources. The first resource always is their professors. And because of the student to faculty ratio, and because all the professors teach their own classes, they don't have TAs and stuff like that teaching their classes. They have the pulse of the students. They know if a student is struggling. Secondly, they have faculty advisors. So that's somebody who's not their teacher, but who helps them, maybe in their area of study. Third are the deans. The academic deans can help. Fourth, we do have tutors that are available to all the students. We also have writing associates who are essentially tutors for writing, which are peers and peer mentors. And then finally, our team actually has a faculty advisor for our soccer team. He's a guy who's been with us for about 15 years, and he's a math and stats professor who's fantastic. He played college football, and he really gets it. He understands what our guys are going through and helps us keep an eye on people. So there's so many layers of support that it's really difficult to get lost and slip through the cracks.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because I know going to any college, some players and some students feel a great deal of pressure, but having all those safety nets makes a big difference. Okay, how about the next slide, Bree? Okay, I just want to bring up one more thing, Eric. You have an assistant coach who is actually has his doctorate in sports psychology, if I remember. How big an advantage is that to you to have somebody on the bench who was a great player, but also was a sports psychologist?
It's funny you should bring that up, Mike. I think you might actually know him as well. He played for you, didn't he? Kieran Dalton is my longtime assistant. He's been with me for 18 years. I actually poached him from Strathaven High School when you were still coaching there. Yeah. And I appreciate the fact that you let him go. He's been with me for these 18 years. And during that time, he went from someone who was working on his master's degree to someone who has completed his doctorate and is now a practicing clinical psychologist. He still teaches in the Innerborough School District as well. And Kieran is also in his day was an all-region Division II soccer player, played at Millersville University, is still to this day the second leading scorer in the history of the program, and a couple of years ago got inducted into their Sports Hall of Fame. So he's got the academic creds as well as the athletic creds. And the advantage to us, Mike, is that I'm able to concentrate on the tactics and the big picture stuff. I have a couple of assistants who help me with the technical and the detail stuff. And Kieran is able to really help with the culture and the mental aspects of the game, which gives us an edge. Because if you think about all the pillars of being an athlete, you've got your fitness and your strength and your conditioning. You've got your skills and your technical talent. You've got your tactical ability and your decision-making, right? You've got all that stuff, your soccer IQ. But there's one other piece, and that's that mental toughness, that mental piece that very few schools at any level treat the way we do. And for us to spend as much time and really focus on that as much as we do, when we get to the NCAAs and other teams are just running on fumes, our guys are finding new life because they're so mentally tough and they've been through the cauldron, and Kieran has really shaped a lot of that for us.
Yeah, seriously, I would recommend any player who has the ability to play at Swarthmore College to attend there. It's a special time. You're a special coach. The college is amazing. So let's see if we have any questions from any parents or players, Bree.
Yeah, so that was great. So parents, players, I'm going to lower everyone's hand right now in case there's anyone raising their hand. And okay, so that's already done. So if you have a question, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and I will unmute you so you can ask your question. Oh, so it looks like I have a question in the Q&A. You can also go into the Q&A at the bottom and type in a question. So first question is, have any of your players gone professional?
Thanks for asking. That's a great question. I was just having a conversation with one of my current players today because that's sort of an aspiration of his. We have one player who actually played in the MLS for the Philadelphia Union. His name was Morgan Langley. He's the all-time leading scorer at Swarthmore. He started out as a real pain in the neck, somebody who almost got cut from the team because his attitude was so bad. But we were able to turn him around. And after only scoring 3 goals in his freshman and sophomore years, his junior and senior years, he scored 14 goals each season, which led the conference and got him first team All-American mention, which was really phenomenal. But he got a tryout with the Harrisburg City Islanders when he was in his senior year here. He'd finished his eligibility at Swarthmore, but in the spring of his senior year, he tried out for Harrisburg, made the team, played with them through their whole season. And when their season was over in late summer, the Union called him up and he played for them for the rest of the season, which was the season that they made the playoffs for the first time. And Morgan actually got to play in the game that they clinched a playoff spot. We also have another player who's now coaching professional. Oh, by the way, Morgan Langley is working in the front office at the MLS now. He had a 5-year professional career, played over in Ireland after he finished here in the States, and now he's working for the MLS. Our other student who went what I would consider full pro, we've had some semi-pros as well, played all over the world, in Thailand, in the Maldives Islands, in Macedonia, and finished his career with 2 years in Germany. He's now coaching Division II soccer down in South Texas. You remember Ladule, don't you, Mike?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Great. So we have a few more questions that have come in. This first one, I'm sure all coaches have a different answer, but it's pretty broad. What do you love most about the game? If you could put it into a bottle and tell us about it.
I'll throw this at you. What I love most about the game, I also hate most about the game. And that is, you could be Sheffield United or you could be Manchester United. You could be flying at the top of the league and be one of the best teams in the world. And you could show up to play on your home stadium and lose to Sheffield, who are, they've only won 1 game all season. Or you could turn it, you could be Sheffield, be down in the doldrums and facing relegation, and you could knock off Man United at Old Trafford. And that's the beauty of football, is that we have this amazing sport, which no matter how scripted it is, no matter what it says on paper, it's always going to be different. It's always going to throw you some surprises.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So now we got another one. Do you look for high school athletes or mostly showcase tournament type players? So I think the question is, do you recruit players that play for their high school team or just club players?
That's a great question and a really good distinction, because it's hard for me to get out to watch individual high school games. So I don't spend a lot of time recruiting at high school games, but that doesn't mean I don't recruit high school players. One of Mike Barr's best players came to play for us, but he was also playing on a pretty high level club team as well. I was lucky to be able to see him because it was right in our backyard. Most of the players that are in our team played some high school ball. If they were in the academy, they might not have played at all. But it really doesn't matter to me if you're playing high school or club, as long as you're playing at the highest level possible, challenging yourself. It's just more likely that I'm going to be able to see you in person with a club team or at a club showcase or something like that.
Sounds
Great.
good.
Yeah, so that leads into this next question, which I think you touched on a little bit in your discussion with Mike. But the question reads, what type of environment do you weigh the most heavy when evaluating a recruit? An ID clinic, high school, game tape, or some other scenario? Obviously, recruiting them at a showcase or something like that.
Well, they all bring different things to the table for me. I can't, in an ID clinic, I can't really see what type of leader you are. I can't really see how you deal with adversity the way I might at a high school game or a tournament, because, those clinics, nothing's really on the line as much as it is when you're playing for your high school team and your coach is deciding whether or not to pull you if you're not playing well. So I think they bring different things. The one nice thing about ID clinics, we host a big one here at Swarthmore every summer, the Elite 300 Soccer Academy, which is, it's been running here for about 15 years and brings kids from all over the country and coaches from all over the country as well. The one thing about that that's valuable is I get to see you in multiple scenarios. I might get to see you play in a training session, in a small sided game, and in a full sided game. And I get to see you in the dining hall and in the dorms. And so I know your character after having worked with you at some of these clinics. That's a little bit different than going to see you at your high school or your club game.
Great. Okay, so it looks like we just have one more question unless somebody types it in while you're answering this last one. But the question is, how often do players on your team see a psychologist?
Okay, that's a really good question. And it's one that I can't answer. And why can't I answer it? Because of doctor-patient privilege. So even though Kieran is a sports psychologist and he's a clinical psychologist, unless my player tells Kieran it's okay to talk to me about it and let him know that they're seeing each other, I won't know that. Now, if they talk to each other sort of off the books and it's just, hey, I want some ideas about this, that, or the other, students have gone to Kieran to talk to him about how to get out of a slump, or they've gone to Kieran to talk to him about, various things that aren't really privileged things, and they're not going to his office and paying him money to do it. Well, then, we might have a conversation. But I would guess that my students, probably a similar level of any college students, whatever the percentage is out there. And I would guess that more students of mine than I know have gone to see psychologists.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did get another question in,
Okay.
and I think this one's a pretty good one for your perspective as a college coach. For a younger player at a premier club level who is typically playing the same position regularly due to the team needs, should a push be made to get them more exposure to other positions? Is that important at a younger age?
That's a really good question, and it's a source of a lot of debate. And I would, I'd almost defer to Mike on this in terms of what they say about development of players. My personal feeling is, if you can play multiple positions as a young player, it is valuable because it gives you a more 360 view of the field, gives you a better perspective on, on all the positions. And like I said, when you get to the next level, whether it's a different club or a different age club, high school, college, those coaches may put you in a different position. Should a push be made? I mean, the question would be, what's your goal? If your goal is to move out of that club to a different club, maybe yes. If your goal is to have a great experience with your teammates and your coach, maybe it's best to just be a good team player and do what you need to do. But maybe Mike has a perspective on that.
Eric, I think the advantage of playing high school ball, in addition to playing on a high level at a club team, is that normally you play a different position. You might be an outside back, but I might need a forward, and you might have the skills there. So I'll put that player up there. So oftentimes they come in saying, I play a certain position, but because you have kids ages 14 to 18, they may fit into another position on a high school team and play a different position, which I think is valuable. But I recognize when players get to be 16, 17, 18, coaches are focusing on winning to a certain degree. So they normally play players that are going to be the best for the production of their team.
Yeah, great answers. So we have a couple more if you're willing here, Eric.
Sure, absolutely.
So the next one is, I actually think this is a pretty good one too. Is there value as a college soccer coach looking at it? Is there value in the recruiting agencies? The example given in the question is like NCSA.
No, I don't think there is. That's the short answer. I think what they do is a buckshot version of what you should be doing. You pay them to do research for you and to pick out what should fit for you. The problem is I get emails at Swarthmore with kids who have 2.5 GPAs and kids who have 3.0 GPAs who couldn't even couldn't even consider Swarthmore because these companies don't do their research. They don't, the value is not there. And I think you could do a lot better job spending a couple hours yourself researching colleges, researching programs, putting your name and your information out there. Every college now, every college soccer program has an online profile that you can fill out. And the only thing I get from NCSA or any of those other recruiting agencies is the exact same thing I asked for in my online profile. And I would much rather hear from you in a personalized email that gives me your email address. The problem with these recruiting services is they give you their recruiting email address. And so I can't even go to you directly once I get your information from them. So I usually throw them in the garbage and delete them off my email.
That's a good answer. So we have another question. This one, I'm sure the answer to this is yes. But I'm going to add a little piece to it. The question is, have you ever had any player that's had a huge injury? Let's add on to that. What does your program offer to help them through those types of situations?
Great question. And Mike talked about the resources that we have at Swarthmore, and that, you know, it's pretty common at the college level. You have full-time trainers on duty, and these people are, you know, they're here 24/7 for us, before practice, after practice, when we travel on the road, taking care of students on their off days and so on and so forth. So injuries, you know, I had our trainer actually went out on the field in the middle of a game for a student who had his kneecap, his patella, displaced. And she was able to put it back in place. And all they had to do afterwards was put ice on it, and he was able to recover fully because of how capable and how talented she was at her job. And I think that, you know, we've had guys I had one boy, he was going to be the conference player of the year in his senior year. But at the beginning of his senior year in a preseason scrimmage, he got a concussion from a cheap shot from the opponent and ended up not playing again. And it was devastating to the team and to him. He walked off the field, didn't realize that was the last time he would step on the field for us. So we've had a range of injuries. We've also had guys who've had bad knee injuries who've come back and been all conference players. So it really depends. But the good thing is at Swarthmore, we have this incredible training program, sports medicine program, which is going to do everything possible to help you rehab and recover from any injuries you get.
Yeah, great. So another one that I think a lot of people get confused with when they're looking at colleges. Do you give full athletic scholarships for soccer at Swarthmore?
No. Division III of the NCAA does not allow for athletic scholarships. Now, half of my students are on some form of scholarship, either based on their need. So financial aid based on the FAFSA, the financial aid for federal application for financial aid, that's the form they have to fill out in order to get financial aid. And if you qualify for need at Swarthmore will fulfill it. Also, we have students in southeastern Pennsylvania and in the Delmarva Peninsula. We have what's called the McCabe Scholarship, which is based on leadership and overall qualities. It's not based necessarily just on academics. A lot of schools in Division III have academic scholarships as well, though. But if any coach in the Division III level is to tell you that we can get you a scholarship, they're breaking NCAA rules.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great answer to that one. So I think that question will actually wrap us up. Unless Mike, you have anything more you want to add, or Eric, you have anything more you want to add?
Yeah, this is just for Eric. He realizes my respect for him and the program is extremely high. And I would recommend to any player and their family, if they get the opportunity to go to Swarthmore, they're going to be thrilled with the outcome and what kind of individual Swarthmore produces. So we just hope Eric has the great seasons he's been experiencing because he deserves it.
Mike, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for those kind words. And the respect is absolutely mutual. I've known you since I was a measly assistant coach and was calling you up to talk to you about some of your former professional players to find out if they might want to attend Duke University or Notre Dame. So You've definitely been a very strong supporter for me throughout my career, and I appreciate it. And thank you, Bree and Mike, for having me out today. And thank you all of you out there in the audience listening.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us. Mike, thank you for asking such great questions. Players, I hope you guys were able to take away some information from this video chat. If you have any further follow-up questions, please feel free to send me an email. You guys all have my email from this morning. If it's something I need to ask Eric about, I will. And we will send a recording of all of this out tomorrow. So if you want to rewatch it or follow up to clarify something, you'll have a link to the recording tomorrow. But Eric, thank you so much. Mike, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody.